Hey everybody, this is Andy, aka Love Retro BTW, across Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. I do a podcast every Saturday called Cafe BTW, a morning gaming podcast, a retrospective look at the wonderful world of retro gaming, from interviews to guests. Join us every Saturday, like a Saturday morning cartoon, starting at 8 a.m., 11 a.m. Eastern. Also, if you're on Twitter, please join the brand new retro gaming community, a place to share, connect, and show your love for the retro gaming community. All the links are down below. And remember, enjoy the Gamers Week podcast.
Coming up on Gamers Week podcast. They're going to say, well, now as a result of that, we were able to hire on more QA testers and more developers, right?
That's such bullshit. It went to some suit's yacht.
Of course.
Or the boob job of their latest mistress, whatever.
Which I'm not opposed to. But
you're not opposed to boob jobs?
They're not for you.
You know what? I won't get into that.
Aren't they, though? Aren't they?
For everybody.
No, thank you.
I'm so disappointed this will not make the episode.
I know.
No way in hell it will make the episode.
These are great jokes.
It is.
Donnie just discovered a whole new kink.
Yep. Hey, honey, you want to play Total Recall tonight?
Again?
Only this time, I'll be the three-breasted midget. Oh, Jesus.
Start off with an orgy. I got 5 mouths to feed.
I got kids, man.
All right, you ready to start this?
Yep.
Donnie?
It's not me.
I know, but there was a question. There was only one answer to it. I was waiting for your response.
She speaks for both of us. I'm ready.
All right. Oh, okay.
Wait a second. No, sorry. Yes,
no,
Ryan.
no take backsies. No take backsies. You gave me that power and it is mine now.
She's got power of attorney.
Now, you do realize, like Uncle Ben's rice said, with great power comes great responsibility.
Did you say Uncle Ben's rice?
Yes. With great rice comes great flavor.
All right. Welcome to Gamers Week podcast. Like the name says, we analyze the best, the worst, and the weirdest headlines of the past week in the video game industry. This is episode 75. 75!
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's actually 69 plus 6, right?
You can do it.
Do you want to hesitate a little bit longer so you can count it in your head? Or? I know math is real hard.
I almost
There
said
are
4,
the
so we're good. We're
Good save.
Yep. But today is Wednesday, May 31st, 2023, and I am Ryan, aka Retro Game Brews, and I will be your host for this evening, but I do have with me 2 wonderful co-host. Our first host is turned off by laziness, poor hygiene, and deep Lord of the Rings lore. Blue Williams. Blue, how you doing tonight?
That last one is not necessarily a deal breaker if you really have nailed the first 2, though.
It just helps her get to sleep.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You know, there's value in that.
Babe, tell me about what happened in the Silmarillion.
Yeah, whatever. Then the one age, you know, the one you were talking about last night.
And of course, our next host has got the Quado to your Quaid, Donnie G Retro. Donnie, how you doing tonight?
Ryan.
So we don't always talk about our downloads, but we just recently hit an absolutely huge milestone for the podcast. So I wanted to announce we just hit 20,000 downloads lifetime for Gamers Week podcast. Woo!
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all, gentlemen. Congratulations. That's f***ing awesome.
So since we're at episode 75, since we have 20,000 downloads, I'd like to discuss a pet peeve that I have with both of you.
Oh, okay.
Uh-oh.
This
All
is
right.
the Festivus airing of grievances. Got it.
Yes. Welcome to Gamers Week podcast. You see that little thing right there after podcast? What is that?
It's a period.
It's a period. What happens after a period?
A pause?
There you go. You two do not like to pause after that. You just go right into it. It's Welcome to Gamers Week podcast. Like the name says, I'm just like, and every single time it just kind of, I'm just like,
I can't believe this is something that not only have you noticed, that you have taken issue with.
and Ryan's not talking. I hope he doesn't think that
No,
I'm
he's
being-
changing it. He's changing it to
I'm
a comma so
changing
he can keep reading it how he likes.
All right. There we go. I didn't even make it a comma. It is just Welcome to Gamers Week podcast.
Rant over.
Jerk face.
The jerk store called and they're running out of you.
All right. So why don't we jump in then to our reviews, reactions, and requests for the week. Starting off with In Yo Face 86 says, another great episode. I still remember my dad watching me play BioShock, and his reaction was priceless when you first stick the needle in your arm. I'll leave it at that and keep it clean.
Definitely a great game.
All right, next up is Rain Harlock says, nice podcast about Gollum being a protagonist. I think we could have done it, but not the right way. Remember Telltale? That company could make wonderful stories with any series or characters you can imagine because they had a talent for writing. It's a good point, and it sounds like we'll kind of get into this a little bit about that game. But spot on. And lastly is Alexa8532 says, great podcast. I always hear you when I walk to and from work. You make me laugh alone in the street. I'm glad we make you look like a crazy person on your way to work.
We encourage public displays of craziness here on Gamers Week.
And now it's time for the
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question. You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Son, we live in a world that has polls, and those polls have to be created by a man with no help. Who's going to do it? You? You, Writer's View? RGB has a greater responsibility than you could possibly fathom. You weep for RGB and you curse the podcast. You have that luxury. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that putting another option in the poll, while tragic, saves lives. And his existence, while grotesque and incomprehensible to you, saves lives. You don't want the truth because deep down at places you don't talk about at game conventions. You want us to create this poll. You need us to create this poll. We use words like very, important, poll. We use these words as a backbone for a life spent defending something. You use them as a punchline. I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very poll that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just say thank you and be on your way. Otherwise, I suggest you pick up a controller and start a game. Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to. Did you vote other in the very important poll?
I did the job.
Did you vote other in the poll?
You're goddamn right I did.
Well done.
Was that
well
good?
Done. Oh, man.
Was that good?
That was fantastic. The payoff at the end was chef's kiss.
That's Oscar worthy for sure.
Every Monday on Twitter, we post our VIP, our very important poll. If you'd like to participate, follow us on Twitter at GamersWeekPC. So the question this week was, who are your favorite twins in video games? Twins, Basil, twins. Coming in at third is Porom and Palom in Final Fantasy IV at 21%. Second place, Liquid and Solid Snake with 31.1%, and sliding into that first place spot this week, albeit very, 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 very slim, are Billy and Jimmy from Double Dragon at 32.9%. Now, 14.9% of you said other, so let's take a look at some of the comments from the poll. At Eric Albin says, do the ice climbers count? They're cute. What about Massa and Mune? They make up a good part of the story in Chrono Trigger. I think Ryan would have to comment on that.
We will accept it.
Okay. At Puzzle Better says, no contest, Bub and Bob from Bubble Bobble. Betcha Donnie G Retro agrees.
Oh,
yes, I saw this one. I'm just shaking my head. I never should have let that cat out of the bag.
Way too late for that. Way too late for that.
We got to live with our mistakes. At Dark Zansel says, Alfred and Alexia Ashford from Resident Evil Code Veronica. So messed up, I can't forget.
Mm-hmm.
At Ludo Timbo says, keeping it real nerdy, Illidan and Malfurion Stormrage from World of Warcraft. Brothers at odds, both total badasses. Good point. And at Black Ruby Comics says, I was going to click the third option, but I think you misspelled Bimmy and Jimmy. Actually. So based on the question this week in the poll, Blue, what was your choice?
I went with Dante and Virgil from Devil May Cry.
Okay.
They are half demon and half human. So one, Dante follows more of the human side, where Virgil follows more of the demon side. And Dante is carefree and wild, and Virgil is more introverted and methodical. But they go through all these types of Shakespearean almost character arcs. And at the end, eventually they have to, well, I'm not going to say what they have to do because that's a spoiler for Devil May Cry 5. But it's watching the way that their relationship changes and evolves over the course of the games is really interesting. And I just think those are really cool games. So Dante and Virgil, for sure.
Awesome.
Nice.
And Ryan, what was your choice this week?
So I'll get into my choice for a second, but Dante and Virgil almost made the poll as a choice. I literally flipped a coin between Porum and Pollum and Dante and Virgil, and Porum and Pollum made it. So it was close. It was very close.
Dang it.
Yeah. But the reason I chose twins, of course, it's if you're into astrology, it's Gemini time. So 'tis the season.
Good to know.
Mm-hmm. But my choices are actually Porum and Pollum from Final Fantasy IV. They're two young mages that you interact with quite a bit. They're really funny. They have this like fun banter back and forth. And the two of them are also really great characters to play with. But there's one thing that they do towards the end of the game, and I'll try to eliminate some of the spoilers. But it was one of the few moments in that game where it was like a little teary, a little emotional.
It's very tragic.
Yeah. Right. As you get into like the first couple of Final Fantasies, there isn't a whole lot of that emotional connection. But as you get further into Final Fantasies, I think this kind of thing set the tone for what it could be moving forward. So definitely a cool pair. I'm going with them.
Nice.
Very nice.
What about you, Donnie?
I mean, a lot of great choices this week. One of the first ones that I was going to go with was Liquid and Solid Snake.
Of course,
you have Billy and Jimmy from Double Dragon. I love Liquid and Solid's whole story arc in the Metal Gear Solid series. But the ones that I went with, probably lesser known to people in the video game world, not so much as far as the comic books and cartoon and toy line, but Tomax and Zamet from G.I. Joe. There's a G.I. Joe arcade game, which is like you're going straight forward. It's a run and gun straight forward, but it's a shooter game, right? And Tomax and Zamet are the twins. They're the Cobra twins. They're uppity, upscale. Almost, I guess they come from an affluent family, but they joined Cobra because I guess they had nothing better to do. And they're identical twins. The only thing that separates them is the part in their hair, and the shoulder pad on Zomax is on the left side, and the shoulder pad for Zamat is on the right side. That's how you can tell them apart.
Easy peasy.
Exactly. I've loved these guys ever since I was a kid because I thought that they were badass. I have several of their action figures. Now, do I own that game? No. And unfortunately, the two G.I. Joe games that came out for the Nintendo did not feature Tomax and Zamet, but still one of my favorites.
I want to be rich enough one day where because I'm bored, I turn to crime, and that's okay.
Well, it's a good thing because crime doesn't pay. And since these guys are wealthy enough, they don't need it.
It's all right. They got to trust, baby. So why don't we go ahead and shout out our patrons for the week?
We couldn't do what we do without the help of our gorgeous patrons. Here are the generous folks supporting Gamers Week on Patreon. Princess Kitty Mew Mew, Rai Rai's secret best friend, Mega Retro Man, Gamma Troid, Michael LeKite, Emo-esque, Bill Tucker, The Real Retro Game Brews, Fruitcake's #1 stan, Ducks with Thick Thighs, JPEG is pronounced like JFEG, the P stands for photographic, Pasta Imposter, In-Person Impersonator, I Have to Go Now, My Planet Needs Me, Wizard of Zardog, Bobson Dugnut, Retro Blast Pat, Great Siaman 81, B&T Zilligai, Geek With That, Johnny Boombots, Crunchy Kong, Sheriff Snacks, Frank Grande, Love Retro BTW, Steven Sand, Ramboski, Terry Kinnair, Ducks in Disguise, Jim and Colleen, Games with Coffee, Hybrid Divide, You Fall Before Me, Davey PGH, The Red Ox, PDX Family, including Shannon and Luke, Zach Huge Thanks, #1 Blue Sick Voice Fan, and Random Retro Dude. If you like what you hear today, and we really hope you do, please consider joining us on Patreon. Your support helps cover the cost of producing the show, as well as other cool stuff we'll be doing, like prizes and giveaways. You'll also gain access to our weekly patron-only bonus cast called Gamers Week Uncut, Patrons with Benefits. Visit patreon.com/gamersweek or follow the link in the show notes to learn more.
All right, so why don't we check out our headlines for the week? Our headline segment is proudly sponsored by the Retro Game Club podcast. It's a fantastic, family-friendly retro gaming podcast, and in each episode, Rob and Hugh pick 2 games to play and discuss, as well as news, interviews, and other topics. Right now, they want to know your favorite crazy video game quotes. Send your answers to email@retrogameclub.net or follow the link in the show notes.
There are so many iconic ones.
Oh, yeah.
There is I Am Error, All Your Base Are Belong to Us.
Uh-huh.
Or
Yes.
even the I used to be an adventurer like you until I took an arrow to the knee.
To the knee, yep.
But I think that my favorite is so iconic and it stretches back decades. It is You Have Died of Dysentery. So iconic, struck fear in the hearts of children everywhere.
That's a quote that continues to live in so many people's minds rent free that it's crazy.
So there's 2 that come to mind. The first one is from Friday the 13th. It's "You and your friends are dead. Game over."
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is, ironically enough, comes from Final Fantasy IV. It is "You spooty bard, tell it to Edward." I love that one. I would get that on a t-shirt if I could.
I have seen that on many t-shirts.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, to Etsy I go.
Yep.
Now, this isn't a crazy video game quote, but it is one of my favorite video game quotes of all times. It is from my favorite video game of all time, which is BioShock. "A man chooses, a slave obeys."
That's deep.
It is deep. And almost so much as it defines who you are because it's so powerful.
And we're going to talk about this next week as well on the Philosophy Week podcast.
What is.
No. That's when our first episode will be What is a Man?
Yes,
That's actually another great quote. "What is a man? A miserable pile of secrets." Beautiful. Well done. That was like meta. Clap.
For PC Gamer, Nintendo blocks Steam release of Wii emulator Dolphin. The developers behind open source GameCube and Wii emulator Dolphin have received a legal notice from Nintendo warning against Dolphin's impending release on Steam. Because the Dolphin emulator violates Nintendo's intellectual property rights, including but not limited to its rights under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, we provide this notice to you of your obligation to remove the offering of the Dolphin emulator from the Steam store, reads the document. I would characterize this not as a DMC takedown notice, and instead as a warning shot that the software Dolphin, if released on Steam, would, in Nintendo's view, violate the DMCA, says attorney Kellen Voyer of Voyer Law, which specializes in intellectual property and technology law. Fire a warning shot across her nose.
So across her nose, not op it.
Who made that, Matt Gunner? If Dolphin were to be released on Steam, the bigger question is whether Nintendo would truly pursue legal action, and if it did, what would happen? A ruling in either direction would have far-reaching implications for emulation, as most, if not all, emulators of modern game systems could likely be held in violation of anti-circumvention provisions if Nintendo were to win the case. If a ruling went in Dolphin's favor, it would likewise be a major vindication for the emulation scene. Previous lawsuits filed by Sony against Bleem and Connectix both found that the emulators had not violated copyright with their use of the PlayStation BIOS and firmware. Those lawsuits have long been used as a precedent to uphold emulation as legal in the United States, but it's a complex topic, and Nintendo's case here would likely be argued on different legal grounds. For the time being, Dolphin will remain off Steam. Its GitHub page and website remain unaffected. The emulator developers have received no direct contact from Nintendo or takedown notices targeting their other places where the emulator is hosted. My question is, if there's a precedent that's been set because of PlayStation, what other legal grounds does Nintendo have?
Well, I feel like if they had grounds to go after Dolphin itself, they would have done it already. There must be something about putting it on a marketplace.
But is it going to be for free, though?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, so that's the thing I don't get. You're not making any money off of it. We all know it's Nintendo's MO, to shut stuff down that they can't control regarding their own intellectual property. But the fact that you're making this available for free for an older system that you've put in your rear view mirror, what's the point? What's the point in fighting this? I still will not ever get that.
I wonder if this is a kind of notice that potentially they're looking to add a GameCube emulator on the Nintendo Switch Online.
Well, that's been a rumor for a long time, and we even talked about it a few weeks ago. Emulation is such an interesting gray area. Copyright laws seem to make it like emulation is legal, but you can't actually do it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You can't download the ROMs, but you can have an emulator.
Right, exactly. It's like you can own the bong, you just can't use it.
It's a display piece. It's a display piece.
It's like all the sealed games in my collection,
And the whole thing with ROMs used to be, and probably still is, well, you can have the ROM, but only if you own the physical copy. Well, what happens when we get into an era where they're no longer making physical copies of discs or cartridges?
Right.
And then it's like, okay, now it's going to be illegal to own any type of ROM going forward.
Foreshadowing.
And that excuse, that's always been nonsense anyway. Nobody ever does that.
It's the biggest wink, wink.
Right, yeah, exactly.
No, I don't have this big bag of weed in my trunk. Wink, wink.
It sounds to me like Nintendo's doing this to scare the developer here for Dolphin. So I really question whether Nintendo would want this to truly go outside of a settlement of some kind. But the only thing is that you're running into is that because they're not charging for it, what would you ask for as far as damages are concerned? It's not like you're selling the ROMs. It's not like you're selling the actual Dolphin system itself. You're not literally taking money out of Nintendo's pocket. It's all speculative, right?
Right.
Which is, maybe that's why this is not an actual DMCA.
Right.
It's like a pre-DMCA. Do you ever meet those couples? They're like, well, we're not engaged yet. It's just a promise ring. We're engaged to be engaged.
They're engaged to be engaged.
Yeah. It's something kind of like that. Because, you're right. They're not actually having anything to do with Nintendo's property. But emulation has always been this kind of underground thing.
Right.
And you're not going to stop that. It's just going to go back underground. I think putting it on Steam was maybe a chance to give it a tiny bit of legitimacy. Mm-hmm. No matter, it really hasn't lost anything if it goes back where it's always been.
And really, to that point, if it does go forward and they lose, you've just opened the door.
Right. And Nintendo doesn't want that to happen.
Exactly. So this is kind of a lose-lose scenario, though, for Nintendo, I think. Because if they take it down, you're right. It goes back to underground. They don't have any control over it. It's what it always has been. Mm-hmm. If it goes through and they lose, yikes. So out of the three possible endings in that, they win. Hooray. Good for Nintendo. But again, people who want it are still going to get access to it. So it's a fruitless endeavor for them.
Did Nintendo do this with the NES and SNES emulators that were out there?
So SNES 9X. And
exactly. And Nesticle, all that stuff.
Not that I'm aware of. Nest Cafe too, yeah.
Yeah.
Are those on Steam?
They're not. You're right. That's the biggest difference.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just to keep everything copacetic, they don't release it on Steam. they make it available on most of these other sites where people can get Nesticle, SNES 9X, or any of the other retro game emulators. Just put it out there.
It sounds like that's what they're doing with their GitHub site.
Okay.
It sounds like you can download it from there. But Nintendo is concerned because it's on Steam. Oh, how dare you?
Yeah. Like I said kind of earlier, there must be something about it being on an actual marketplace that either has them scared or gives them some sort of legal foothold to get in there and try to stop it.
Right. And I think it's because it's more publicly advertised because it's on Steam, because that's a major hub for people to go. And normally, if you were to go to GitHub, I've been to GitHub before looking at stuff that I can download. As a normal person, I wouldn't go in there trusting that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But seeing it available from the Steam marketplace, it's all packaged up tidy with a nice little bow. It's been cleaned and dusted off and ready to go for you. Hey, no viruses. Here you go. I would rather trust that. And I think maybe that's why Nintendo is throwing up a stink, because it's like you just said, it's a marketplace. It's a widely advertised marketplace where people can go and have no qualms about the integrity of what they're downloading.
And to that end, I think what you're running into is that there are plenty of people out there that wouldn't consider emulation prior to that, or maybe even weren't even aware of it per se.
Right.
Highly unlikely, but nonetheless. So all of a sudden you've got all these people who are like, man, I can play GameCube games. This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go ahead and do that. So now that it's widely available, they're going to start looking at other things to emulate.
I mean, it's hard to say for sure. All we can do is speculate because obviously we're not lawyers.
I am well versed in bird law, though, and other lawyerings.
Right. All right, next up from Eurogamer, Blizzard really confident of smooth Diablo 4 launch following server stress test. Blizzard has said it's feeling really confident Diablo 4 will enjoy a smooth launch following a series of server stress tests. The developer held a Server Slam event over the weekend to test the upcoming action role-playing game servers one final time ahead of launch in June. Speaking to Eurogamer, Diablo 4 Associate Game Director Joe Papiora said Blizzard is feeling good about the launch because it had learned so much from the various tests. Every one of these betas has been transformational in terms of our understanding of our own technical capacity and what we need to do to make that a smoother launch experience in general, Papiora said. Papiora revealed Blizzard has run internal testing on Diablo 4 for well over a year, spinning up servers with millions of automated accounts, creating basic actions such as finding a piece of gear and equipping it, to killing a monster and starting a party with another robot. While Blizzard has learned a great deal from these internal tests, there's no substitute for live player tests, Papiora said. When you have people coming through different ISPs and coming in through different servers around the world, there's so much more data you get from that. And with each of those, we found lots of little things that happen. Like this happens with clan invitations. This happens when you join a party in a certain way. Lots of little things like that across the board. Blizzard will be particularly keen to ensure a smooth launch for Diablo 4 after the disastrous launch of Diablo 3 and its infamous Error 37 message. Even the more recently released Diablo 2 Resurrected launched with a number of issues. Like its predecessor, Diablo 4 is always online, which means any server issues could prevent people from playing a game they've paid full price for. Even if they do manage to log in, players are concerned about lag and other performance issues, potentially ruining the launch experience.
So I want you to pretend that you're walking into a doctor's office, you're about to get surgery. And he says to you, I'm really confident that this is going to go smooth. How would you feel? Because personally, I would be like, whoa, what do you mean you're really confident?
Reminds me of the commercial where the guy walks in, it's the doctor. He's like, hey, just who got his license reinstated last week? No, not really, but hey, whatever. You know how in sports, the announcers, like when they're covering a pivotal game, right? And they say, oh, Tom Brady hasn't thrown an interception in the last 15 games that he's played.
Yeah, the jinx.
While up 14 in 2 minutes in the final quarter. And then, oh, there he goes. It's an interception. This is exactly what it sounds like is going to happen. Blizzard saying they're really confident of a smooth launch because we've stress tested the servers. Nothing can possibly go wrong. We've logged in and we've had them pick up a loot. We've had them open a bag. But now you have all of these people doing real world actions from, like you said, several different ISPs coming in, doing everything. And I don't know. I'm going to stand back, waiting behind a riot shield waiting for the blast to happen.
Right. I mean, that's just kind of something I feel like you should expect. If you are going to play a live service game on launch day, you should just expect that there's a really great chance it's gonna suck.
Right.
Exactly.
And to announce it, to say that you're really confident, you're really putting yourself in a hole.
And I mean, even like, let's say it goes perfectly. Let's say that Blizzard did everything they needed to do. It could still be like Overwatch 2 when they were DDoSed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh.
You just never know what's going to happen.
They're testing fate. You're right. They're like, come screw this up, please, hackers.
Right. So, hey, if you're looking forward to this game, good luck.
What happens when a game like this goes to launch? A game that's always on. You have to have an always on internet connection to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't work. Let's just say for hours, days, whatever. You buy it on launch. You spent the $79 for this game. You're eager to go home. You install it. You download it, whatever. And then it doesn't work. What kind of compensation, realistic compensation, does the gamer get for purchasing it and then not being able to play it immediately because of that? Is, if any?
Probably nothing. And like, even like a restaurant, the first week it's open, you kind of expect that the kitchen's going to be rough.
Of course. But at least with a restaurant, hey, we'll give you a voucher, we'll give you 50% off your bill, et cetera, et cetera. This should be the same thing. If you buy this game and you can't play it for hours or days, they should be able to get you something in compensation, most notably from in-game content.
Yeah, I was going to say like a super rare weapon or piece of equipment or something like that. Or
Exactly.
Early access to the cow level or something. Moo.
To be a bit of devil's advocate, remember when we had Leroy Patterson on and he was talking about his days as a game tester?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you know, if you've got a team of 30 people testing a game, within the first hour the game is launched, it will be tested by so many more people than they could ever possibly test it with. So they're going to find stuff regardless. So while I don't advocate for the release of broken games, I do wonder, realistically, what more could Blizzard do to prepare?
You're not
wrong. Jinx, you owe me a beer.
Non-alcoholic, of course.
Of course.
There's got to be some give and take from both sides, right? We can't have Cyberpunks and Redfalls releasing all the time where they're just broken. But on the other hand, I don't feel like gamers should be throwing a fit and demanding all this kind of restitution if something doesn't work 100% perfectly, if there's a few bugs on launch day.
Right, but if it's catastrophic, then yes.
Right. Like in this case, where the servers just can't handle the load, giggity, then... We're not talking about a bug. We're talking about denied access to the game that you just bought. That's a stark contrast.
Yeah, I suppose if it went on for days and days, probably I would agree with you. But I think a rocky first day or two, I think that's a little more to be expected. And you know they are going to be working round the clock behind the scenes to get it all ironed out.
Of course. As long as they're beefing up their infrastructure, there's really nothing, and they're putting stress testing on it, there's nothing more that they can do.
And trust me, I feel dirty trying to defend Blizzard. I really do. This is a weird place for me to be in. Yep, I gotta go.
Forever unclean. All right, next up from Forbes, Gollum, a game that exists, is the worst reviewed of the year by far. Choo Choo Charlie, now Gollum. What's going to be our third, like, hey, this doesn't sound bad game that turned out to be
We jinx games, you guys. Right.
But I will say that I like this. We'll go ahead and read the article, but I'll save my comments for the end.
Okay. So if you're ready for a game that makes Redfall look like Tears of the Kingdom, you may want to check out Gollum. It is hard to understate just how poorly Gollum is reviewing. The game currently has a 38 on Metacritic on PS5 and a 43 on PC. That makes it the worst reviewed game of either platform in 2023. 18 points lower than Redfall on PC with a 56, 26 points lower than Forspoken on PS5 with a 64. This is an industry where a 60 is considered a disaster, and it's got a 38. While normally there may be some amount of leeway provided to a smaller developer like Daedalic, given a lower budget than AAA games, a main problem here is that Gollum is charging a full $60, $70 for a special edition that paywalls things like emotes and Elvish voiceovers. Not that a lower price would have made the game better, but it certainly compounds the problem that the game already has. Inverse rated the game a 3 out of 10 and said Gollum is full of technical problems that make an otherwise unpleasant experience even worse, and the game's boring story makes it hard to recommend, even to the most hardcore Lord of the Rings fans. GameSpot gave it a 2 out of 10 rating, saying if the developer's main goal was to really put you in the shoes of such a pitiful, unlovable character faced with constant pain and suffering at every turn, they were at least successful at that. Burn!
Oh, God.
The Guardian's review labeled Gollum's a derivative, uninteresting, and fundamentally broken stealth action adventure that fails to capture anything interesting about Tolkien's fiction. Developers Daedalic has since apologized for the game's state at release, saying it deeply regrets delivering an underwhelming experience and pledged to improve the game. Oh boy.
Yeah, I like the fact that whenever we review a game previously, we say, oh, this looks promising. Oh, I like the idea that they put forth here. You know, it just depends on what the gameplay is like. Oh, yeah, I could check that out. And then it just absolutely gets demolished in the reviews.
Murder. This was murder.
Oh. Now, granted, I don't go solely based on reviews anyway, be it movies, shows, or even video games. I like to try things out for myself. But if every single critic review is calling this like just absolute dog shit,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to pick this up. I might wait until it's like $5.
Which will be tomorrow at this rate. A lot of people say that reviews don't matter when I'm deciding whether or not to play a game. Review scores are useless. I'm going to go ahead and play what I want. But when they are so overwhelmingly awful like this, I think that you kind of gotta sit up and pay attention to them. But poor Daedalic, so many non-AAA studios put out bad games every day.
Oh, yeah.
There are shitty games released every single day. If they had just made this game under any other name, it would have been terrible. Like 5 people would have taken notice of it and they could have swept it under the rug and gone on to something else. But it was so high profile that now everyone is like, wow, how did you mess up this bad?
And the thing is, the reviews aren't saying that there's something controversial in there, right? It's not politically based. So clearly this is not getting review bombed. This is people's genuine feeling about this game.
Don't these studios have focus groups that they have people come in and check the game that say, hey, we'd like you to test this game. We'd like you to play this game and see what's the fun factor like for you? Do you enjoy it, etc.? Did this not happen?
Maybe a lot of times the smaller developers don't have that. Or if they do, they've got like 5 people or they have their mom test it or something.
Grandma!
Oh, Booby, it was such a nice game. You're such a nice boy.
I don't know. It is really weird. It is really weird that this went so bad, especially when like the early footage of the game seemed promising. And then the game as it is now, it looks completely like it should be on PS2. Like not even in a charming way. It's like, what did you do?
I just looked on YouTube for Gollum. We're looking for gameplay, and one of the first videos was you never go full Gollum. Oh my God.
Well done.
Oh man, I'm using that.
When you say it looks like it was made on the PS2 or made to be played on the PS2, I could totally see that.
Are you watching it like actually in motion? It looks so not just stills, but actually how he moves and stuff. It's not good.
Oh, geez. Okay.
His facial expressions and everything. Even with Lord of the Rings, like the way the special effects were back when those movies were made, Gollum was so expressive. And then in this game, it's like, what happened? Seriously, this is what I need to know. What happened?
It's like shovelware on PS2. It's not even like a AAA PS2.
Right.
And you know what? As a huge Lord of the Rings buff, super disappointed because they had so much potential, absolutely so much potential with this game that it could have been. My hope is that the pledge to improve this game I mean, though it sounds like even just the story and gameplay elements, like you would have to redo the whole game. So maybe it's like Gollum 1.5. It's like Kingdom Hearts or something.
I mean, with Kingdom Hearts, they just lost the source code and had to rebuild it. That is not quite the same as the game itself is fundamentally broken.
Maybe they lose the source code on purpose.
Oh no, the game is gone. Oh no.
Our bad. Somebody deleted it. They taped the game over it. All right, so why don't we jump into our top 3 new releases for the week?
Etrian Odyssey Origins Collection, Switch and PC. Explore the rich beginnings of this RPG franchise with remasters of 3 timeless adventures that inspire players to go on a journey of discovery, mapping deep dungeons, and building customized parties for exploring and engaging in tactical combat. Traverse and draw a map of the environment while encountering enemies large and small in turn-based combat, then return to town to rest, sell materials for better equipment, and manage your party, selecting from a collection of heroes to build the right team for the job, which is just like any other RPG out there.
Yeah.
It's not a great description, okay?
It's not. It's like they're selling me a Yugo. Killer Frequency, PS5, Xbox Series XS, Quest, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Killer Frequency is a first-person horror adventure that puts you in the shoes of Forrest Nash, a late-night radio host whose callers are being stalked by a mysterious killer. Use branching dialogues to interact with a variety of eccentric small-town personalities, including potential victims and suspects. Solve puzzles, save lives, and run the switchboards, all while listening to a jukebox of retro 80s tunes. Street Fighter VI, PS5, Xbox Series XS, PS4, PC. Here comes Capcom's newest challenger. Powered by Capcom's proprietary RE engine, Street Fighter VI represents the next evolution of the series. Discover the meaning of strength in World Tour, an immersive single-player story mode. Play legendary masters and new fan favorites like Ryu, Chun-Li, Luke, Jamie, Kimberly, and more in this latest edition, with each character featuring striking new redesigns and exhilarating cinematic specials. Street Fighter VI offers a highly evolved combat system with 3 control types: Classic, Modern, and Dynamic, allowing you to quickly play to your skill level. So based on these wonderful descriptions this week, Ryan, what's your choice?
I'm struggling to pick just one.
Right?
This is a week where like all 3 are actually pretty interesting. Now, despite the Chat GPT description that was created for Etrian Odyssey, that is totally up my alley. Oh my God. Turn-based RPG and like a retro-looking style. I'm all in. I'm definitely going to pick that up. Killer Frequency sounds fun. That looks so fun. And the fact that it's got retro 80s tunes in it, and it's kind of like based off of a horror adventure, and it seems like it's going to be creepypasta all day long, and I love it. And of course, Street Fighter 6. It's freaking Street Fighter. Come on. I'm really interested in what Ryu is bringing to the mix.
We know what Ryu is bringing already.
Right. We talked about that early on.
So yes, I'm interested in checking that one out. And I think we talked about before about some of the changes that are going to be happening for Street Fighter 6. So it'll be really cool to see where they go with it. So yeah, I'm all in for all 3. It's a rarity.
Wow.
Sign me up, man.
Blue, is it a resounding all 3 from you too?
No, it's not. Killer Frequency. I like the idea. It seems original and it seems like it could be fun, but I don't feel like the gameplay is going to be something that's going to interest me. I think I would rather watch a stream of it. Street Fighter 6. I mean, everybody loves Street Fighter, but I'm so bad at it. I see the 3 control types and I want to know where's the idiot sandwich one, which is that one, because that's the one that I should play. So I am interested in offline stuff. I would like to check out the World Tour, but this is not a game that I would play a ton of. This is a wait till it's on sale someday.
Okay.
But Etrian Odyssey Origins Collection, I've already played those games. I already adore them. And I already pre-ordered it. It's not getting a
Nice.
physical in the West. It has a physical release in Asia, and Play Asia was selling it on sale the other day.
I am now going to check PlayAsia. Thank you. Donnie, what about you?
Well, it's almost a resounding wash for me this week, except for there's one game that doesn't tickle my fancy, and that's Etrian Odyssey. I've never really heard of this. I'm sorry to disappoint.
I've talked about him like 17 times on this show.
I know. Both of you have. Both of you have told me how much you like this particular series. It never was one of those staples like Final Fantasy or Dragon Warrior that really reeled me in. So maybe I'll pick it up later at some point, but at this time, probably not. Which leads me to Killer Frequency and Street Fighter 6. And both of these games sound promising to me. Killer Frequency, like Blue said, it's very unique. It's original. The one thing I might have a problem with is the dialogue. You know, you constantly have to choose from dialogue and stuff like that, which is, it's not terrible.
It's not terrible, but did you watch the trailer?
I did.
Because the dialogue is voiced, and the voices are so cheesy.
I know, but cheesy can sometimes be good.
It can be, but it can also not.
That's right. So I'm flipping a coin here. I'll give that one a shot. But Street Fighter 6, I've actually been considering getting into the competitive fighting scene.
Oh.
And I know I can do it with it's going to take some practice. And that's one thing I never really did with Street Fighter 4 or 5, which, I mean, they're still great games to play. I can play Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 3 like nobody's business, just like Mortal Kombat 2. I can go into the arcades and wipe the floor. This is a little bit different, though, with so many different special moves, which they're calling, I think the term for it is dynamic, which it actually replaces the EX feature that they used to have in the Street Fighter 5 and Street Fighter 4s. So all these special moves and stuff like that, combo breakers, counters, all that stuff. I don't know that world. So it's going to take a little bit to get used to it. But Street Fighter 6 and Killer Frequency are my choices for the week.
All right, now it's time for our main topic for the week.
From Ars Technica, Alan Wake 2 and the death of disc-based video games. Anyone who pays attention to the games industry knows that the segment of players buying games on physical discs has become less important as physical releases become more and more niche. Still, even in recent years, you could usually count on big-budget console games from major studios to receive at least a perfunctory disc release to fill up the dwindling GameStop shelves. So it was a bit of a surprise that the release date announcement for Alan Wake 2 came alongside news that developer Remedy Entertainment and publisher Epic Games currently have no plans to release Alan Wake 2 on disc, as they put it in a new FAQ. When you look a little deeper, though, what might be more surprising is that there haven't been more major console publishers willing to give up on discs entirely. The Alan Wake 2 FAQ notes correctly that it is not uncommon to release modern games as digital only. In fact, measured on a per-title basis, the vast majority of console games are now not available on disc at all. Still, such disc-free releases are relatively rare when it comes to the kinds of major games that dominate the console charts. Looking at the top 20 best-selling PlayStation titles listed on Sony's official store page, for instance, brings up only 2 discount titles released without a disc-based option. $30 PSVR port Red Matter 2 and $22 boomer shooter Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun. If you limit that list to games costing $60 or more, it becomes practically impossible to find a PlayStation bestseller that isn't available as a disc as well as a download.
Remedy and Epic actually cite pricing concerns as one of the reasons why they wanted to avoid a disc-based release this time around. Not releasing a disc helps keep the price of the game at $59.99 and the PC version at $49.99, they write in an FAQ. PC/console pricing discrepancies aside, it's not an awful point. While disc games are incredibly cheap to produce, overhead costs like packaging, shipping, and distribution, and warehouse and retail space cut into the margins a developer can expect from a $60 disc game. That's especially true with inflation and higher gas prices, who have contributed to more high-end games bumping their asking price to $70. While publishers could offer digital versions at a lower price than their physical counterparts, in practice, most publishers keep prices consistent across the different distribution methods, occasional digital clearance sales notwithstanding. One of the oddest arguments Remedy makes against a disc-based Alan Wake 2 release, though, is that its developers did not want to ship a disc product and have it require a download for the game. The statement is thrown off as a aside, as if requiring a download to play a disc-based game is simply a law of the universe. Sure, day one patches are an incredibly common way to fix late-breaking bugs during the game development process. Still, most disc-based games ship in a form that's at least playable using nothing but the data on the disc, with some notable exceptions. Saying that a download would be required for a theoretical disc-based Alan Wake game implies that Remedy is already anticipating a day one release to be literally unplayable without such a patch.
Other arguments aside, the primary reason Remedy doesn't feel the need to release a disc-based version is relatively high up in the FAQ. A large number of players have shifted to digital only. That large number of players has been widely apparent across the industry for a while. EA has made most of its money from digital game sales for over a decade. Destiny 2 was making a majority of its launch window sales from digital downloads in 2017. Capcom said in 2021 that a full 80% of its new game sales were digital downloads, while Sony's 2020 fiscal year results showed a majority of PlayStation full game sales were coming as digital downloads. But even as a physical game sales became a smaller and smaller portion of major publishers' bottom lines, few, if any, have been willing to completely give up on the shrinking segment of the console market that still prefers their games on discs. If a disc-free Alan Wake 2 succeeds, it could be an inflection point that convinces other console game makers that it's finally time to fully transition to the disc-free world that PC gamers have been part of for years. That would have serious implications for those who want to preserve their game libraries for years, not to mention those with limited internet access. But at this point, consumer patterns and business realities may make it inevitable. Who knows? In a few years, the idea of releasing even major console games on disc could seem as weird as Microsoft's recent 10 DVD release of Flight Simulator on PC. If that happens, Alan Wake 2 will at least be partially responsible for the final death knell of disc-based gaming.
It's here.
You think so?
It's the harbinger of change.
No, sir, I don't like it.
No. And the frustrating part is that we can sit here and pound our fists all we want and say, but preservation, but being able to keep the things that you purchase, blah, blah, blah. But if more and more people are buying digital games, then it doesn't matter what we say.
Right.
They're just going to go with what the vast majority of their audience wants. If their audience wants digital games, then they shall have digital games.
And I think we've been saying this for years, that this day would come where physical media is just, it's not in the cards anymore. People don't prefer it. And I would say a majority of people don't prefer it. Let me rephrase that. And as a result of it, they're going to kowtow to the majority. And what we're going to be forced to do is to buy digital. If you want to play the games, you're just going to have to do it that way. So even though we'll go kicking and screaming, it's the normal. It's the new normal.
If you're charging $60 to $70 for a physical copy of the game, and right now that has significantly changed to what we used to know when we got a game. We got inserts. We've got a detailed instruction booklet, all this stuff. Now what do we get? A plastic case with just the disc or just the game. That's it. No instructions, no intricate little story things or inserts or what have you. Just that, a piece of plastic. So are you going to tell me that maybe your game is now going to be $49? Can you honestly say that you're going to discount your game that much? Or is it, well, here's the digital. We still want that $69 from you, bud.
Right. That's the thing that's always made me crazy is, okay, if we release it digital only, it's a cost savings, but it's only a cost savings to the publisher. That savings is never, ever, ever passed on to the consumer. No. Why are digital games the same price as physical games? Why? Why is that the case? That should not be the case. And I can forgive digital games and people for playing so many digital games if they were cheaper. If they were like, I don't know, 25% cheaper or 20% cheaper or whatever the math ended up being, then I could completely understand and defend the choice of digital games. But when they are the same freaking price for no reason, then no, I want a physical copy of it.
I mean, That's business, because what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, now as a result of that, we were able to hire on more QA testers and more developers, right?
That's such bullshit. It went to some suit's yacht.
Of course.
Or the boob job of their latest mistress, whatever.
Which I'm not opposed to. But
You're not opposed to boob jobs?
They're not for you.
you know what? I won't get into that.
Aren't they, though? Aren't they?
For everybody. But that's I guarantee you that's what's going to happen. Is they're going to say, well, now we've been able to invest more into our business as a result of that. If you think about it, it's the same way when anytime like inflation happens and the price goes up, the price never goes back down when inflation stops.
Never.
You know, like no. They just look at it as like, hey, look, more to our bottom line. Perfect. We'll just run with that. And what I think it might do, though, is if we continue with physical games, that might creep up to $80, $90, $100 for a game, where if we go all completely digital, playing devil's advocate here, maybe that sticks it at 70. But that being said, I doubt it. I highly doubt it. At the end of the day, they just don't care because we'll still end up buying it. Yeah, sure, we'll be upset about it, but another Tears of the Kingdom comes out, you're going to buy it. You know you are.
Yeah, but I bought Tears of the Kingdom physically.
Right, but in the future, Tears of the Kingdom 2 comes out and it's all digital, you're still going to buy it. And if it's the full price, you're still going to pay it.
Shut up, you don't know me.
Don't we?
I mean, I buy a lot of digital games. I do. And we were having this discussion the other day on Twitter with Retroblast Pat.
Mm-hmm.
So many indie games, they only have digital releases. That's all that's available to them. And if they ever get a physical release, usually it's because the digital sales of the game went so well. I mean, Hollow Knight is a great example of that. Cuphead, games like that.
Shovel Knight.
Yeah, later get physical releases because they were so popular digitally. And for both of those games, I bought them twice because I want the physical. Mm-hmm. Even with Etrian Odyssey collections. In the West, it's only digital. When I went out of my way, once I learned there's a physical somewhere else I could have. And the great thing about the Switch is it's region free, so it ain't matter.
Right.
I'm not completely opposed to digital, but I don't like the idea of paying full price for something that could have a physical and the publisher just doesn't want to bother. That's a completely different thing.
I got to say, though, that certainly gives limited run games or super rare games, those companies, something to work with, right?
True.
Because if they can port those over to physical games and sell 10,000 units of it right away.
Yeah, but they're never going to be allowed licenses for AAA games like that.
Eventually, though. So if
you
would really, yeah, because I mean, they've been doing that a lot lately where they're releasing games that were digital only years later. I mean, like 2 or 3, maybe even
right, but usually indie games.
Typically. But if you're doing it far enough off of the initial release of it, and they're still making money off of these games, because, you know, limited run games could easily charge more, and you would pay it because you want the physical game. They can make money off of that easily. So
absolutely.
Oh, and maybe it's not specifically limited run. Maybe it's a different company that does that. But
they're going to partner with them.
Right.
They're going to say, hey, you didn't release this physical. We would like to. You're still going to make money. It's a win-win for that company.
And still, again, a lose-lose for the consumer.
Well, nobody cares about us.
I wouldn't say lose-lose simply because they are eventually getting a physical copy of it. It's just not as they wanted initially.
It's that word compromise. Nobody likes the end of it, but you get something you want, but you didn't get the whole
halfway
thing.
happy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But years down the line, I mean, I think I've said this before too. The kids don't care about physical. It's us dinosaurs that care about it.
Right.
So when we die and we go to pass on your collection to your kids, they're going to be like, oh, okay, whatever.
Look at all this junk. We got to have a yard sale now that grandpa died.
Right. And you know what? Maybe there's a resurgence. Maybe it's like, you know, vinyl records where, you know,
that's
the
true.
hipsters get out and they're like, hey, look at this Switch game. It's like physical or something.
Ooh.
You had to like plug it into a video game. I know, it's super weird, right?
You had to blow on it before you put it in? What?
Well, maybe that'll still resonate, you know?
Wait. I don't like the fact that we have an always on console that has an always on game for a company that can just say, you know what, we're no longer going to support this console. And it will happen.
Yeah.
It's shown that. The PS3's dashboard will shut down at some point. Sony will say, we are no longer going to support the servers for PS3. It'll go away. So you have a finite amount of time to enjoy this game, and it's not going to be forever. And I cannot wrap my head around that. I cannot get behind it. I will not promote that at all.
But to that end, I think that also says something about what the future of consoles will be. Because if you're talking about needing a console to play a game, yeah, they've got digital versions of those consoles right now, but they still have physical versions. And eventually it's going to get to the point where it's just a streaming thing, right? And it'll be a dongle.
That is what I was going to say, is it certainly lends a lot to the argument of subscription services.
Exactly.
Like we do for TV. Like Disney, what did I read? They're booting a bunch of series off, like their new Willow series.
Right.
Nobody can really complain too much because you didn't pay for it. You just bought a subscription. So that's probably where we are eventually headed when streaming speeds get a little faster for games, a little more reliable. When we get the tech figured out, that is probably 100% where we are going, is subscription services.
As Gollum would say, we hate it.
Exactly.
Yup.
I can agree with Gollum on this one.
All right, so before we move on, let's take a quick break to talk about our sponsor. This week's segment is proudly sponsored by the Elitist Podcast. It's a show where three friends and occasional guests play games about video games, including trivia, game show games, and more. Here's this week's trivia question. Even though the successor of the Atari Falcon 030 was never released, its unique physical design concept was copied and referenced in the patent for which console that released 5 years later. Hint, the console in question really took off. Tune into the Elitist Podcast this Wednesday to hear the answer. You can find the Elitist on your favorite podcast platform. We'll also have the links in the show notes. Now, I knew the answer to this question only because I was thinking about doing a Gaming History 101 on Atari consoles. So I know this one, but I would be very impressed if either of you did.
So are they, I'm confused by the wording. The successor to the Atari Falcon was never released.
Right. It was the Atari Falcon 040 was the successor for it, and it was never released.
Okay. So when did this console come out?
So the console that referenced it came out 5 years later. I don't know the exact date.
Took off. The console in question took off. What does that even mean?
So I questioned that because I knew the answer, and I was like, I still don't get why it says took off. So
Okay, so then I shall disregard the hint.
yeah.
Redacted.
Oh, that design was really, wow. Jesus.
I don't know.
I'm going to show you a picture of this, and you tell me what it looks like.
Well, that looks like a shaved scrotum. I didn't want to see that.
A Sean scrotum.
I suggest you try it. That looks like a...
Redacted.
It is. And the takeoff was the wings that are on the side of it.
Oh, I didn't
That's
get that.
terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Boo! Yes. Just for reference, my AVG antivirus came up and said, we've safely aborted a connection to this particular site because
It looked like it was in Russian, so that's probably why.
Yeah. So.
Oh, that explains why I couldn't even get to it.
All right, thanks for coming, students. Please take your seats. Welcome back to Professor Rybrett's Gaming History 101. And in today's lesson, we'll talk about those culinary concoctions we all craved back in the day, simply because it had our favorite video game character plastered all over the box. We, of course, are discussing video game-sponsored food products.
Hey!
Yay, right. Now, I'm no expert of Eastern religions, but I'm pretty certain the moment you sink your teeth into a food product that's tangentially represents your favorite video game character, you've achieved nirvana.
Oh, really?
I can make so many comments on that.
Sure. Well, at least that was our hope after pulling the box off the grocery store shelf and begging our parents that the video game food was well worth the additional cost. Now, today we won't be covering the stories behind those things as they came to be, as it's a pretty shallow telling. Marketing departments knew video games were hot among the kids, and they exploited us for monetary gain. So instead, we'll be taking a trip down memory lane to talk about weird things we were into back then. Some of them were remembered fondly, and others disappointed us greatly. So I think a good place to start is with a balanced breakfast. Now, I don't know how balanced 30 plus grams of sugar per serving is, but hey, if that's the only thing that you ate for the week, I'm sure you're doing okay. Now, starting off from the beginning, the first video game to be featured in the annals of cereal history was Donkey Kong, advertised on the box as Crunchy Barrels of Fun. And it began production in 1982. Now, this wasn't uncommon for the time to use IPs to sell cereal products, TV shows, movies, celebrities, including Mr. T. I want Mr. T cereal. Yes. Experienced their own cereals in the late 1970s, so it only makes sense for video games to make their way to the breakfast table, too. Now, other video game cereals of the time included Donkey Kong Jr., because why not? Pac-Man cereal, which included marshmallow ghosts, no word if you had to eat a power pellet before tackling the ghosts, and the Nintendo cereal system, which included 2 types of cereal in the box, a fruity mix of sweetened corn pieces representing the Super Mario Brothers IP, and a berry mix of Legend of Zelda IP, because I know the difference between fruity and berry. I don't. Now, interestingly enough, though, there was a bit of a lull after the early to mid 1980s in the realm of video game cereal, but eventually in the 2000s, Kellogg's would release its Lucky Charms knockoff cereal around the Pokemon craze that included marshmallows of Pikachu, Poliwhirl, Oddish, and Ditto. Did you munch them all?
Oh, God.
Thank you.
Hi-oh.
So the next category we're going to cover has no definitive history that I could find, but it was probably as ubiquitous and enticing as cereal that we craved. And that, of course, is gelatin and sugar fruit snacks in the shape of our favorite video game IPs. Now, the first one I could find was from the 1980s, was Super Mario Brothers 2, which included shapes of Mario, Wart, Toad, Shy Guy, Luigi, and Mauser, and Princess Toadstool, to name a few. There were a few fruit snacks for things like Donkey Kong Country, Zelda 2, Pokemon N64 characters, which, by the way, included a Donkey Kong logo in it. Okay.
Donkey Kong is Pokemon?
No, but N64
I think it is. I think it is. I think the fruit snacks have made it canon.
And, you know, even more recently, Mario Kart and Mario 3D World and Kingdom Hearts and Candy Crush all got their own line of fruit snacks. Now, next is candy, and there was a lot of random candy items with video game characters plastered all over them, mostly from Nintendo. Examples include the 1989 Nintendo Bros. Chocolate bars, which came in milk chocolate and chocolate-coated mint bars. That sounds gross. Now, Topps came out with the Nintendo bubblegum dispensers shaped like Link and Mario and came in red, blue, green, and yellow. Fleer came out with the Pac-Man tablet candy in the shape of Pac-Man and the Ghost and were sold on a card that resembled the maze. And of course, the myriad of Pez dispensers that have come from Sonic characters, Mario characters, Animal Crossing, Donkey Kong, including one hideous DK Jr. one. I highly suggest you look it up, and much more. So this next one, I'll admit, I'm stretching the definition of video game food, but who couldn't forget the turtle pies from Hostess? So Hostess was known for mini pies covered in icing and filled with fruit. But for the turtle pies, they were covered in green icing and filled with vanilla pudding. In fact, on the front, it said something about achieve vanilla pudding power.
Didn't you try to remake those?
I did make them. And the ones I made were way better than the ones I remember. I just remember them being really gross. Like as soon as you bit into it, you're like, what is this? Ugh. But finally, I really wanted to talk about the bizarre, odd, and downright strange video game food promotions. Starting with Sumioni for the PS Vita, got its own pizza by Pizza California out of Japan, and it was covered in, any guesses?
Nothing.
Squid Ink.
Oh. That's not so bad.
Oh, it's just like off-putting, though. I got to be honest. Now, if you're a fan of Indian food like me, you'd be happy to know there were a couple of curry and rice options out there for you in the video game space, including Pokemon curry and the bright blue Sonic curry, which, according to legends, turned your BMs blue.
I imagine so.
Blue turds?
Yep.
Yep.
Holy crap.
Literally.
Yeah.
And lastly, Dragon Quest fans would be happy to know that one of the mascot of the series is available in edible form as a blue slime pork bun. Blue in color, these meat-filled pastries with their vacant smiles just waiting for their inevitable death is the perfect companion to any late-night session of Dragon Quest XII. Make sure that they stay in a container of some sort because they're known to run away.
Meat filled.
So to kind of wrap things up, food manufacturers saw us coming from a mile away, and I'm certain most of us didn't mind it in the least. These foods were often just as nostalgic as the games they represent. Now, please comment on Friday's pin tweet and let us know what were your favorite video game snacks back in the day, especially if I missed one of your favorites. Thank you for attending today's Gaming History 101. And just a reminder, if you have any ideas for a story you'd like to hear, send us a message at gamersweekpodcast@gmail.com, and we might feature your suggestion.
Now, the four that I specifically remember as a kid, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong Jr., and the Nintendo cereal system, with Super Mario Brothers and Zelda. All four of those, every time we would go to the store, I would beg, I would plead, I would throw a tantrum, I would cry, I would threaten to poop my pants, whatever I needed to do to get this cereal home with me. And, I was successful maybe about 10% of the time.
Still worth it. Hashtag worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The ones that stick out the most to me were the Nintendo Shasta sodas.
Oh, yes, yes.
The Mario Brothers one. I think I may have mentioned them on the show before, but they were weird fruit flavored ones. The Mario was punch, Princess was cherry, Luigi was berry, and Yoshi was apple. And they were in cool, like little kid-sized cans, and they brightly colored, the characters all over them. And they were terrible. They were so disappointing. I was so excited to convince my parents to buy them. And then we got them home and they were terrible.
You're going to drink every last one of them too.
Probably. I think they probably sat in the back of the fridge for forever. And it's a shame that they're not still there.
I also remember Chef Boyardee came out with, because, they had like every character and every IP out there was some shape of the pasta that they had. And that was a big one. I remember, people talking about the Pac-Man version of that. So there was Ghosts and Pac-Man itself, and it came in like golden chicken. Yeah. Gross. It sounded so gross. All right, so that'll about do it for us this evening. Thank you for listening to episode 75 Gamers Week podcast, and a big thank you to the Retro Game Club podcast, Elitist Podcast, and Love Retro BTW for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget to check out their links in the show notes. If you want to connect with Gamers Week, follow us on Twitter at GamersWeekPC, email us at gamersweekpodcast@gmail.com, watch us on Twitch at twitch.tv/GamersWeekPodcast, visit our merch store at gamers-week-podcast.creator-spring.com, or if you want to do it the easy way, follow the link in the show notes. And join us on Patreon at patreon.com/gamersweek. Finally, since you made it all the way to the end of the episode, please leave us a rating and a review to let us know how we did. We really value your feedback. And while you're there, consider subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Quaid.
Zip Quaid. What the hell is that? Man, I got kids to feed.
How did we get 20,000 downloads with you two doing this all the time?
That's exactly why we have 20,000 downloads.
I don't like him, but I think he's right.
Right. He's out of line, but he's got a point.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, and thank you very much for the 20,000 downloads.
Yes. Thank you guys
Thank
so much.
you.
Did
did you vote other in the very important poll?
I did the job.
Did you vote other in the poll?
You're goddamn right I did!
Welcome to Gamers Week Uncut.
Welcome to Gamers Week Uncut.
Welcome to Gamers Week Uncut, patrons with benefits. This is the unscripted, patron-only bonus cast with less editing and more dirty jokes. We don't know where the conversation will go, but we're sure it will be weird.
This fish just went right on my nipple, and I'm just like,
I Google Street Fighter 6. The first search result that comes up is people think they can see Ryu's dick in the Street Fighter 6 reveal.
Listen up here, kids. You're not going to want to get one of those VDSTDs things, right? Make it fall off. When you go, grab a pro. You'll be doing it for America.
that was perfect.
If you want to hear weekly episodes of our patron-only bonus cast, join us at patreon.com/gamersweek.